right, we're here at my VermiHut indoor worm bin, and last time we were in here, we showed you all the levels starting with the basin, and we added a new inoculating tray to the bottom. Today, we're going to do a major rotation of the trays to harvest and start a new top feeding tray from our oldest inoculating tray. So let's go ahead and get started. So when we were in here last time, it was actually 18 days ago, because I had been on the road, and what I did right before I left was put in 2 pieces of watermelon, and that was about 3 days ago, and check that out. They totally went through it and ate almost all of it. And right here is probably just a ball of worms. Yep, sure enough, they just had a feast, and that was only 3 days ago that I put that in there. So watermelon is one of their favorite foods. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna be doing a major rotation. So this is the top active feeding tray. And sorry, I just gotta show you this real quick. This is so cool. This is solid worms right here. Every little bit of this is worms. In fact, I'm just gonna do a little bit of a time lapse here. That is crazy. I can just kind of feel them going through my fingers there. So this top active feeding tray we fed 18 days ago, and we put all kinds of food in here. We put in some banana peel, some lettuce stalks, cucumbers, peppers, carrot tops, apples, and we also put in some Urban Legend food, which this time was mandarin oranges. And as you can see, there aren't any in here, or as you cannot see, I don't see any of those peels or even the mandarin oranges themselves, although I do smell just a faint bit of citrusy smell. So they've done a fantastic job on that huge feeding that we had in here. So what I'm gonna do is just kind of fluff this up and prepare it to have another tray put on top of it. And that next tray that we're gonna put on top is going to be our oldest inoculating tray that's been sitting in this system for a while underneath, just filled with cardboard shreds. So let me go ahead and fluff this up, and we'll get to the next phase here. All right, so just some quick observations from fluffing this around. These castings are looking fantastic. In fact, if I really wanted to, I could just sift these out and use these castings right away. But this top feeding tray is gonna have another tray put on top of it. So this one is going from the top feeding tray down to the pre-harvest tray. And it'll be about 60 days before we totally harvest this again and get the castings out. So I'm just gonna kind of level this off, and we're gonna put our oldest inoculating tray on top of this, and it is gonna become the top feeding tray. So I am just really happy with how this tray has performed over the last about 70 days or so as we were feeding it. It got 7 feedings, and this is what you see. I mean, it was mostly paper and cardboard shreds, and now it's turned into this. So this is absolutely beautiful. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and put the new top feeding tray on top, which was our oldest inoculating tray. So here we go. So this oldest inoculating tray has been on the bottom for about 70 days or so. And right now it looks like there's a whole lot of castings, but as we dig in, I think we're gonna find that it's mostly cardboard shreds. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fluff it up, and then we'll put a feeding in here. And sure enough, this is just a great moisture. As I squeeze it, there's maybe a little bit of water. I didn't squeeze any worms, don't worry about it. They are just fine. So let me go ahead and fluff this up, and then we'll get started. Now, if you notice as I'm going through here, there are worms in here. Even though this was originally put as a dry cardboard shredded tray, the worms eventually come down here as the drippings kind of come in here and infest this. In fact, this is just a perfect moisture level for a worm bin, and it started out as just a dry inoculating bin. And as you can see, as I've gone through here, I've pulled up some of this newspaper, because inside of each of these trays are over 1,000 tiny holes, and that's how the worms come up and down through the different trays. And when you have one of these VermiHuts or worm towers, they go back and forth into the trays as much as they want. In fact, the top tray has the majority. I would say about 80% of them, and the bottom layers probably the rest of the 20%. In fact, a friend of mine who has a channel himself, Mikko A. Gardner, he's got a Worm Factory 360 go ahead and check out his channel. He does kind of the same thing, and he has a ton of worms in his Worm Factory 360. So a lot of these worm towers work the same, and they are fantastic. So let me just finish up fluffing, and then we'll set up a feeding zone to feed this thing. All right, so for this first feeding, I'm gonna do just like I normally do. I put dry shredded cardboard and paper down below. And that's because the worms eat both the food scraps that I feed them and the carbon food source here, which is the bedding, which is the shredded cardboard and paper. So there we go. And then we're gonna put our wet food scraps right down here. So what I had in mind here was some watermelon rinds, some lettuce stalk, and a banana peel. So let's go ahead and put this down for their feeding. I'll start with the banana peel and kind of spread it out. Now all this food has been frozen, and I took it out to thaw a little bit. And look, I've got some apples too. But it's not totally thawed. In fact, I liked it to be just a little bit frozen so that fruit flies and other things don't land on it in the thawing process. And I'm just gonna kind of set these in. And the worms can sense temperature, so I'm not too worried about them getting frozen or stuck to this. They will move away. In fact, I've never seen a worm kind of stuck to any of the food that I've put in. So there is the food scraps that I feed. Now this is a very wet feeding. This watermelon is probably 90–95% water, and it's gonna kind of seep down into the cardboard shreds that I put down there. And this lettuce is a very fast food, as is the watermelon. And so are these apples. These apples have a lot of water, but they are actually a slow food. It takes a while for them to eat the apple. So let's go ahead and add our amendments next. So one of the things I've been adding after every feeding is pulverized oats, and that's just because I had some expired in the pantry. So I'm just kind of finding a way to get rid of it in the worm bin. So there we go. And then I like to use my old coffee and tea grounds and use it as another food source for them. They'll go ahead and eat this. It's finely ground, so it's very easy for them to ingest. And then finally, as far as the feeding goes, I add some pulverized eggshells, which are just grit for them. They have gizzards, kind of like a chicken, and it helps them to pulverize their food. So anything that you think of that might not be dissolvable in water, such as maybe oyster shells or crustacean shells that are pulverized, or something like that, can be used as grit. So now that we've fed them, I'm gonna go ahead and bury this feeding up. I like to keep it below the surface. And that's just a way for the worms to get from it at all angles. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna take our Cocoon nursery from our last harvest, and I'm gonna put it on top here, and we're just gonna kind of pull any baby worms that might be still in there. And we're gonna go ahead and throw them into this level so that they can grow and start feeding here. And that Cocoon nursery had hundreds of cocoons, and throughout these last 70 days or so, I've been taking them out as they hatch and putting them into the top feeding tray. So now that this is the top feeding tray, that's where they're all gonna go. So let's go ahead and get that set up. So as you can see, for my Cocoon nursery, I've just used one of my kids' old toy organizers, and I'm just gonna kind of dig through here, and we'll look for worms, and I'll speed it up. If I see anything big, we'll go ahead and slow it down. All right, so no doubt that I've missed some that you all have seen, or the executive producer and I have missed, but this is about 8 to 9 pounds of harvested castings right here. And each week, as we've been letting them hatch, I pull out some worms. So we probably have picked out anywhere between 250 and 300 worms throughout the last 70 days and put them back in the bin. So let's go ahead and empty this out. And what we're gonna do next is I'm gonna show you the beginnings of how I harvest this VermiHut. And it's a little bit unique compared to what you might think. So let's go ahead and get that done. So here's the tray that was the pre-harvest tray. And now we're gonna harvest. So the way that I harvest is I take all the castings that are in here and I just kind of agitate them for about a minute. And what I'm doing is I'm disturbing the worms, and they're not happy. So what they're gonna do is they are gonna go and dive down into these 1,000+ holes that are in the bottom of the tray, and they're gonna go into that top feeding tray that we just fed. So let me go ahead and agitate this, and what we'll do is we wait 15 minutes in between, and that 15 minutes just kind of gives the worms time to go through those holes. So what's gonna happen is that Cocoon nursery that we just picked all the worms out of, I empty that into my storage, and then all these castings right here will go into that Cocoon nursery. So I'm just gonna keep agitating, and then I'll be right back. So I have showed how I harvest on a few videos. So I'm just gonna kind of show you the first part here, which is the agitation. And if you wanna check out some of those other videos where I've done time lapses of the 15 minutes in between and kind of showed the worms go dive down, I'll go ahead and put some links in the video and at the end and in the description so you can check those out. I also have a couple other bins. I've got a tiny worm bin and I've got an outdoor worm bin where I do different things in, and they run very differently from this worm tower. Let's go ahead and check those out and hit like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. So with that, I'm gonna finish agitating right here, and I hope everybody's having a great day, and happy vermicomposting, everybody. Take care now.